Welcome to another edition of Horse Center, everyone. I am Brian Zipsey, and as always, I have the fantastic pleasure of being joined by my co-host to the East Coast. Matt, one quick question for you. Is there Breeders' Cup hangover, and do you have it?
Yes, there is. There is definitely such a thing as the post-Breeders' Cup syndrome, and I am definitely have a case of it.
My Breeders' Cup hangover comes as a head cold, but the show must go on, Matt. Let's start with the big one, the Classic. Matt, it was billed as a two-horse race between Gunrunner and Arrogate, and much like this year's Pegasus World Cup in January, only one of the big two showed up. Gunrunner gets it done in the Classic.
Yeah, he certainly did, and you know, I think that's a really great thing for racing in so many ways, because I mean, you and I have talked about it before that what we love most about Gunrunner is that he's been out on the track basically nonstop his entire career, little breaks here and there, but you know, a good old-fashioned horse with strong legs that gets better and better, and you know, the horse and the connections deserve this victory for the way he's been handled over the years.
Experience, maturity, Gunrunner has simply become, we both said it before the race, we were right on this one. We certainly weren't right on everything, but Gunrunner had become the best dirt horse in the world sometime this year, and he just rolled through the rest of the year. Great year. Only one defeat, came outside the country, went second in the Dubai World Cup on a course that probably did not favor speed at all that day at Meydan. This was impressive. They ran very fast early, collected, hounded him the whole way. No one came. Arrogate sure didn't come. Collected ran a better race than I thought he would. He was second. The 3-year-old West Coast menaced. I don't think he changed leads in the stretch. West Coast looks like a very good 3-year-old to be third. Arrogate kind of floundered home for a dead heat in fifth. And frankly, Matt, I think he lost mental focus, interest in being a great racehorse.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think there's probably various reasons for that. It certainly happened at some point after the Dubai World Cup. There may have been physical things that were happening for a while that caused maybe part of that change in mental outlook by Arrogate. But wow, he just, you know, he just showed absolutely no interest in competing in the Breeders' Cup.
Still showed some talent to be running a little bit in the stretch, but certainly not the Arrogate we had seen for that year stretch, especially those 4 huge wins. Arrogate was the horse of the year for the first quarter, but the last 3 quarters of the year, it was all Gunrunner, a deserving, worthy horse of the year. Now we look forward to January in the Pegasus World Cup, Matt, and I think it's actually coming up interesting. Obviously, Gunrunner is the name, the star attraction of the Pegasus World Cup. We're kind of looking ahead a little bit more in 2 months now to Gulfstream Park. But Gunrunner on top, but then bring back Collected and West Coast and Sharp Azteca and Forever Unbridled and maybe the Clark winner, maybe the Cigar Mile winner. Sounds like a pretty interesting race that I'd like to see. Gunavera.
Yeah, I agree, Brian. You know, I think there are some other issues with the Pegasus World Cup that are going to have to be dealt with in terms of the financial side of it for owners. I think it's, you know, I think it's got a rocky road ahead of it unless there's some changes with 9 out of 12 owners looking at taking a significant loss. It's tough under its current configuration.
Agree on all, Matt, but that probably is something we could talk about a little bit more as we approach the Pegasus World Cup, still about 2.5 months away. Speaking of the Pegasus World Cup, one of the horses that we expect to be there at Gulfstream Park in January is Forever Unbridled. And Forever Unbridled completed an undefeated season, Matt. She was perfect. Of course, it was only 3 races. But what she did in the Fleur de Lis, then in the Personal Ensign, and Friday in the Breeders' Cup Distaff was, you know, she showed that she was the best dirt filly and mare in the country. No doubt about that.
No doubt about it, and I don't think that was a surprise to either one of us. Again, a horse that has matured and with that, knows exactly what to do. Once again, all three of her races, that strong, steady, powerful closing move to win the race. And congratulations to Dallas Stewart, who picked up his second Breeders' Cup victory there, and to Johnny V, who picked up his, I think, 15th Breeders' Cup there. Johnny V riding instead of Joel Rosario.
Yeah, Johnny V, let's not get into the whole jockey thing. We don't know the ins and outs of the relationship that went bad with Joel Rosario, but Johnny V, I thought, had an excellent, excellent weekend. I thought he was the Breeders' Cup jockey, to me, anyway, that stood out the most. And Forever Unbridled was best. She made that move, as she's done so many times now, that early move that carried her to victory. Abel Tasman ran huge in defeat, and I think Abel Tasman really, we were certainly questioning whether a late was taking the 3-year-old filly championship away from her, but Abel Tasman squashed that thought quickly with a strong run, a very good second. She was really the only other horse who ran big in the distaff. Abel Tasman should be the 3-year-old filly champ.
Yeah, and it was good to see that from Abel Tasman. That got rid of that wacky middle move and got into good position and made a nice closing move there. It was too bad that in the race that Stellar Wind just did not show up and show her best in the distaff. The long layoff didn't seem to be the answer. Made me think that something else was going on with Stellar Wind, and that was why they tried the long layoff. But again, great career from that horse.
Yeah, first time she ever ran a poor race, and it was a doozy of a poor race. She just never lifted her hooves, really, in the distaff. Speaking of champions, though, I think we should go to the Breeders' Cup Mile next, Matt. And before the race, I mentioned a couple times, World Approval really, one is a male, one's a female, one's gray, one's not. But World Approval really reminds me of Tepin. Obviously from the same barn, Mark Cassie's barn. World Approval was obviously a good horse, as Tepin was, but then all of a sudden, everything just seemed to click. Very similar running styles where they have very good tactical speed, and then at the head of the stretch, they just have another gear. World Approval was one of only 3 winners out of my top picks for all 13 races, but he looked good, and I think it's going to earn him a championship as well.
I certainly think so, Brian, and World Approval was one of only 2 favorites to win on the 13 races in the Breeders' Cup, and he was just flat out terrific, in good position, fought off a very good field, loaded with Euros, and hats off to the Cassies for getting the best out of World Approval.
World Approval, of course, is a son of that wonderful, wonderful broodmare, Win Approval, the Live Oak Plantation mainstay. She's had a number of Grade 1 winners, World Approval being probably the best and the latest. And he's a gelding, Matt, so we're gonna get to enjoy World Approval more. At least next year, all systems would seem to be on go for World Approval, coming back to defend what I'm going to call a Eclipse Award-winning season in 2017. Looking forward, Matt, I'm starting to get excited about the Kentucky Derby. Now, some of my favorite 2-year-olds, and yours as well, were not in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Montauk, that very impressive maiden winner in New York. Dak Attack, the Ellis Park juvenile winner, who is not your ordinary Ellis Park horse. But what we did see was we saw Bolt Doro, a heavy favorite, and then we saw the emergence of a son of Curlin named Good Magic.
We certainly did, and Good Magic was a horse that both you and I mentioned in some of our run-up shows to the Breeders' Cup as a horse that might do something at a good price, and he certainly did. He was a maiden, but not a typical maiden. He had very impressive runs in his first start, and then in the Champagne, and it was that race that you and I both liked. And the favorite, Bolt Doro, had a pretty difficult trip, slow out of the gate. He was in an outside post position, and that caused him to be wide and wide and wider all the way around the racetrack. And still he managed to get up for third. I heard some people saying that maybe he ran like a couple hundred yards farther than the horses, than the winner. So it was a good effort for Boldoro. Again, I like both of these horses heading down the Kentucky Derby Trail next year. I don't know. I guess there's a question about which one of them should win the Eclipse Award.
Yeah, I have Boldoro still clearly as the winner. The two impressive Grade 1 wins out in California. Good Magic, of course, only has one win. I was impressed with Good Magic. We were not shocked that he did what he did out there. But considering the trip, Matt, pretty tough is an understatement, a drastic understatement. I don't like to take jockeys to task, but right away you could see Corey Nakatani was making a mistake by not getting in, letting Boldoro just drop back a little farther so he could get in and save a ton of ground, because he lost mountains and mountains of ground on the first turn and then just about as much on the second turn. For him to rally and look like he might even get up for second at parts of the stretch was very impressive to me. Boldoro lost. If he didn't lose at least 10 lengths, I'd be surprised. Big performance by Boldoro. He's the best 2-year-old in the country this year. But Good Magic. Boldoro is a son of Medagliadoro. Good Magic is a son of Curlin. Montauk is a son of Medagliadoro. We're looking at some 2-year-olds who look awfully good this year, but look like the type of horses who could really improve. So the Kentucky Derby, throw in Mendelssohn, the juvenile turf winner, the Kentucky Derby list already is looking pretty fun for me.
Yeah, this year so far has been a little bit different than the past 2 or 3 years. There are 5, 6, 7 horses. Throw in those Dale Romans horses also, who, like you said, have some potential down the road to the Kentucky Derby. And I'm sure, as always, there's going to be the late horses that coming out that have been the trend for the past few years.
Yeah, the Romans horses that did run, Dak Attack wasn't there. Certainly didn't like Del Mar. And I guess that's part of the story of this Breeders' Cup, Matt, because not everyone likes Del Mar, that's for sure. One horse who did like the Del Mar course, or at least the turf course, was the French runner trained by Andre Fabre, and that's Talismanic, a very unusual looking horse, Matt. You don't see a lot of thoroughbreds with that much of 4 stockings. He's also got the giant blaze, a real thick chest. Talismanic was an impressive looking horse in the mornings on the track. And then he outdueled Beach Patrol and Highland Reel, who both ran well in an interesting stretch drive of the Breeders' Cup turf.
Yeah, and he was part of the line of horses on Saturday at big prices. He was 14-1, and like you said, found an opening down the stretch and won the race. I got to give some credit to Beach Patrol there, because he ran a really game race. I didn't know if he was going to be able to put together another big one in there, but he certainly did. Just, losing the race narrowly and beating a horse of caliber like Highland Reel. They got the best out of Beach Patrol in the last few months of this year.
Absolutely. That's a Chad Brown turf horse, of course, as so many good turf horses are. Beach Patrol, Matt, went on a long losing streak. He went a full year without a win. But in his last 3 races, the Arlington Million, the Joe Hirsch Turf Classic, and then a very good second, you're right, in the Breeders' Cup Turf, would make him most years a real threat for the Turf Championship. But as we talked about world approval, what he's done this year, I think does trump a very game Beach Patrol. And congratulations to a master turf trainer, Andre Fabre, for bringing that horse. I got off him. I thought of him because there was some good turf form in there. But I looked at his one big race on firm turf last year in the Arc, where he was just got it handed to him. But obviously he's matured, and Talismanic gets the win. Another horse who is matured this year, just really came out of nowhere. We saw in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. I think he might have been the second choice for both of us. Roy H. really had a great year.
He sure did, Brian. 6 starts, I think, 5 wins, 1 second. He had an absolutely fantastic year. Ran a huge race in there to cap a phenomenal day for trainer Peter Miller, who had not won a Breeders' Cup race heading into this. And Roy H. was the second win on the Breeders' Cup card for Peter Miller. And again, as we're going to say in a number of these races, a disappointing finish for a horse off the long layoff. Dre Fong in there ended up sixth. He didn't do very much running, Brian.
Yeah, Jerry Fong never got to the lead, Matt, and I know I didn't have him on any of my tickets. I know people love him, but there was just so much speed in here, and the fact that he only finished one race this year made me really worry, but he didn't run even as well as I thought he would. Roy H. has been the best sprinter in the country. It was hard to admit for a while because he really wasn't anything at all special going into this year, and he started the year in allowance company. But 6 races, the only race he lost was also at Del Mar, and he had a horrid trip that day. He was best in the Bing Crosby. Roy H. Really took the sprint championship by the throat. Imperial Hunt ran a very good race to be second, but you could tell Roy H. was getting him. Roy H. is the sprint champion of this year. As I think we know who the filly and mare turf champion will be, Matt, but unfortunately, Lady Eli didn't have her day out at Del Mar.
Yeah, in what was probably the race where a lot of people were looking for that feel-good result. Lady Eli had a really tough start to the race, out of the gate, going down the stretch for the first time. Really tight quarters, really crowded. She got stepped on from the back, and if you saw photos of her leg where a lot of skin was torn off, and yet she still ran around the track and was right in there, right in the pack, and just didn't have the big move at the end, but wasn't that far out of it. It was really disappointing that we didn't get to see the best Lady Eli. But like you said, I think it kind of looks like she might get that Eclipse Award anyway.
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt, Matt. She was the best filly and mare on turf this year in America. Her 3 straight wins on both coasts were very impressive. She didn't really have the chance to run her best. She looked uncomfortable early. Of course, soon after the race, we found out that she was stepped on pretty badly. Bad abrasions, cuts, tearing away of skin. As you said, it looked ugly. She lost a shoe. She got beat less than 4 lengths. In the finish, she beat more than half the field. Shows what kind of heart she has. Just kind of sad that she had to go out that way. She was removed from yesterday's Fasig-Timpton November sale so that they can best take care of her. So it'll be interesting to see what happens to Lady Eli here in the future. But one thing we know, she will be well taken care of. Sheep Pond Partners, a great daughter of Divine Park, trained by Chad Brown. Wahida was the winner. Not a shocking result. She had a lot of good form in Europe. She had some trouble when she first came over to Keeneland here, but obviously she was completely over it, and she really proved best. Wahida is a 3-year-old European.
Yep, and again, another good price in that sequence, 11-1 in there, and good solid win for the Europeans.
Another solid win for the Europeans. I don't know if there was a European in the dirt mile. I don't think there was. But I was a little surprised with the result. Battle of Midway is a horse who, boy, I liked his Santa Anita Derby. I threw him in as a long shot in the Kentucky Derby, and he ran well enough to be 3rd. His Haskell, he had some trouble, but really backed out of it. Then I thought his Shared Belief was very good. But then in the end, I just couldn't bet him off that Oklahoma Derby loss. I guess he had a little trouble there. But Battle of Midway showed up and beat a very good field, and Sharp Azteca, the horse he had to run down and beat, ran his race.
Yeah, Brian, I think you went through his resume and pointed out the thinking that a lot of people had. I think in one of the shows that we did, we both talked about how we liked Battle of Midway possibly in the dirt mile, but then his form got muddied up, like you said, and And after the race, trainer Jerry Hollendorfer said he wasn't sure what was going to happen, but they had made a commitment in their minds after he ran that big race at Del Mar that they were going to give him a shot in the dirt mile, and that's just what they did. And he loved the Del Mar track once again, but this time in the dirt mile, and ran a super big race.
Yeah, horse for course, probably. Del Mar is probably a track he really likes. We know that for sure now. But also a horse that might be just a little bit in and out. But when he runs his best, clearly he's one of the best 3-year-olds in the country, and that was a big performance. I could say the same for Sharp Azteca, who generally is very consistent and ran another big race, this time at 2 turns. Awesome Slew was my long shot of the day. He ran a non-threatening rallying 3rd. Practical Joke also rallied a bit, was 4th. A little disappointing, but nothing disappointing, of course, like as disappointing as the Baffert horses in there. More Spirit and Cupid, neither one. Accelerator for John Sadler. They just didn't show up.
Yeah, and again, a couple of Bafferts off of long layoffs, and they just did absolutely no running.
Yeah, Baffert had a tough Breeders' Cup. He got 2nd and 3rd place money in the Classic, but I believe it was 0 for 11 for probably our most famous trainer in the country right now. Matt, let's go back to the juvenile fillies. The juvenile, I really liked what I saw, and that's been kind of a theme for me this year, where I just don't like the fillies, the 2-year-old fillies, nearly as much. And once again, you mentioned Caledonia Road coming off that Frisette, where she rallied for 2nd. I didn't really like the favorite Moonshine Memories. Heavenly Love didn't do anything out there. Caledonia Road was clearly the best. But going forward, is this the best we have of the 2-year-old dirt fillies?
I guess maybe right now, but we'll have to look in the late fall and the spring. I'm sure there'll be lots of horses that have yet to make their debut out on the track. Caledonia Road was trained by Ralph Nix. He was one of 3 trainers on the weekend who got their first Breeders' Cup victories. So congratulations to them. And like you said, Brian, it was a race where we didn't love Moonshine Memories, so we were looking around for price horses, and HorseCenter kind of lucked out. I hope some of you made some money on Caledonia Road.
Yeah, and I shouldn't take too much away from Caledonia Road. She's really done nothing wrong. But even after watching that race, I just have a feeling like there's a big gap between the colts and the fillies right now. Maybe on dirt, that's true, but not on turf, because I think we saw something very good in the juvenile fillies turf. Rushing Fall has done it now in New York, Kentucky, and California. And once again, Rushing Fall looked really good. I guess it was on Friday, and when in the juvenile fillies turf, September had a little trouble and rallied nicely, but Rushing Fall was best.
Oh, no question. That was a definitive victory in there. She looked like a winner every step of the way. Chad Brown's 9th Breeders' Cup victory to kick off the Breeders' Cup card. He's won this very race 3 years in a row. So we know he's good with the turf runners, and he's good with bringing them out when they're young.
And I think it does bring the question, Matt, as little interest as I've shown to the 2-year-old dirt fillies, maybe Rushing Fall for a change. Maybe we see a turf filly get the Eclipse Award. I don't suspect that it's going to happen. My guess is it won't. But Rushing Fall undefeated with 3 very impressive wins all across the country. Rushing Fall should be given at least serious consideration for an Eclipse Award as the best 2-year-old filly in the country.
I agree with that, Brian, and maybe she'll get a little bit more of a look, because it harkens back to when Lady Eli was a 2-year-old, and in retrospect, maybe she should have won the Eclipse Award that year. I think Rushing Fall should be the choice.
Good. Now, speaking of juvenile turf horses, Mendelssohn, I was a little surprised that he went off the favorite. Now, he was almost 5-1.
Yes.
So that juvenile turf race obviously was a wide open affair. I wasn't big on Mendelssohn, but what I am big on is his breeding, Matt. He was a $3 million purchase. Leslie's Lady is his dam. He's out of one of the last crops of Scat Daddy, who, of course, is strictly one of the best sires in the world on any surface. We've lost Scat Daddy. Leslie's Lady into Mischief for one, Beholder for another. Now she has Mendelssohn. Wow. And the good news about Mendelssohn, the winner of the juvenile turf, is that he's really pointing for the Kentucky Derby now.
Well, that'll certainly be interested. And as we know, Aidan O'Brien, the trainer, who got his 12th Breeders' Cup there, is not afraid to take a shot at the big races. I think it's pretty clear that he would like to win the Kentucky Derby some year and go for it with Mendelssohn.
Nice turf horse, good win. Untamed Domain, I thought, ran very well to be rallying for second for trainer Graham Motion. But Mendelssohn, it'll be interesting for me, Matt, what happens as far as his lead up to the Kentucky Derby. If they're really serious about him as a Kentucky Derby horse, I wonder if Europe or Dubai is the way to do it. Maybe Mendelssohn, even under Aidan O'Brien's care, spends more time in America next year, maybe a deputy trainer during the spring, and gets a prep or two in the States. I think that would be a better way to go if they're really serious about winning the Derby with this half-brother to Into Mischief and Beholder.
Yeah, probably if they're serious about it, but, I wouldn't be surprised if they pick out one of the big 100-point races towards the end and use that to come and take a shot to get the points to get into the field and go back and forth, but probably would be prudent to spend more time here on the American dirt.
Spend some time in the States. Matt, one of the big stories, of course, of this Breeders' Cup weekend was all the upsets. And the last couple races I have listed on our chart here, the Filly Mare Sprint and the Turf Sprint, two more examples of heavy favorites. Unique Bella was 7th at even money. Lady Aurelia was 10th at 4-5. The resulting winners were Stormy Liberal was 30-1. Bar of Gold was over 60-1. Stormy Liberal, I could see. I drew a line through that Belmont race. I included him in my tickets. Bar of Gold, I still can't see.
Yeah, Brian, a New York bred who was coming from New York, who didn't have much in the way of past performances, but that's what makes the Breeders' Cup so tough for handicappers and bettors, and for the owners and trainers. You've got these big fields, and you've got talented trainers who are cranking horses up for these spots, willing to take a shot. So if your horse doesn't come and at the top of their game and get a good trip and have everything go the right way, there are so many horses in there that are primed to make a run, and it's gonna happen in the Breeders' Cup that way, and it just makes it so hard to pick winners.
You're right, and the Filly Mare Sprint was a race we both kind of pinpointed as ripe for an upset. We thought Unique Bella was extremely vulnerable. Bar Gold was just really hard to get. You're right, though. She's got talent, and we should give some props to the connections who got her there and did what they needed to do. Amy's Mesa, I think, ran a very good race and has had a very good year. This is a division, the Filly Mare Sprinters. They do give out an Eclipse Award, and there is just no clear-cut favorite for the award. Amy's Mesa may be my choice, being consistent in Canada and having beaten Bar of Gold at Presque Isle and then running a bang-up race as second there, but who knows? And then in the Turf Sprint, Peter Miller. This was a big part of the Peter Miller story. It was interesting to see him celebrate because he really did go crazy. He ran 1-2 with Stormy Liberal and Richard's Boy. Disco Partner rallied nicely to get within a length, but just a little too late, as we thought might happen.
Yeah, and one of those races that's hard to predict, although, like you said, more predictable than Bar of Gold. It was disappointing uh, when the superstars like Lady Aurelia just didn't show up. And our friend Mark's horse, Marcia, it probably wasn't the best kind of race situation, but she made a little nice rally down the stretch to get close, but wasn't going to win.
And Tim Gleichow's horse Buchera was actually fourth, and in the picture at the end, of course, I think he was beaten less than a length as well, ending a very good month for Indiana trainer and Churchill Downs trainer Tim Gleichaw. All right, that's the Breeders' Cup, Matt, in a nutshell. How'd you like Del Mar? I know this was your first trip out there.
Del Mar was a beautiful racetrack, a nice venue. There was all kinds of stuff going on in the infield. Great food, Brian Zipsey. In the infield, they had like 20, 25 food tents instead of food trucks with international food and drink there. So I enjoyed spending a little time out in the infield before the Breeders' Cup races started on Friday. And I do want to mention it was great to meet so many of our friends, Brian, out there, friends of HorseCenter, friends of Horse Racing Nation, who I saw and met at the racetrack, and then at other places, restaurants and things around town after the races.
That's always good to hear, Matt. The HorseCenter, but also HorseCenter fans out there, but also the good food. I'll be checking my mailbox to see if you shipped me any of that great food in the mail. As always, I want to urge you to subscribe to our YouTube channel here on Horse Racing Nation. Thank you to our sponsor, Derby Wars, the best contest site out there. Our producer, Brett Workman, the best producer out there. And as always, thank you, folks, for watching HorseCenter. We will be back post Breeders' Cup next week to talk all the latest in racing. We'll see you then.